Thomas, the Dynamics GP blogster here. In a past video, I showed you how to pass collections from Power Apps to Microsoft Flow, and so you could continue processing data in Microsoft Flow. But what if our Power Apps needs to retrieve data back from Microsoft Flow? So this video today is gonna address that same topic, being able to get data from Microsoft Flow into Power Apps and be able to process that data once it's returned back to Power Apps. So let's see how that's done. In this sample scenario, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually have a user request data on a specific customer from Power Apps. Then we're going to pass that information over to Microsoft Flow. We're then going to show a technique to retrieve that data and send it back to Power Apps. Now I know what you're thinking. I could have actually done this straight in Power Apps and use the SQL connector just like I'm using here to retrieve those addresses for that specific customer record and work my way all in Power Apps without having to invoke a flow. But that's not the point here. The point here is to really dive into how we can retrieve data from any other subsystem using Microsoft Flow, and data that is not necessarily or categorically exposed to Power Apps through any of the connectors, and be able to, say for example, issue an HTTPS request over to some third-party service, get that data and process it back and send it back to Power Apps. Sometimes connectors work just better, and the ability to retrieve data works better in Flow than it is from Power Apps. So this is what this is about. This is not necessarily that you can use the SQL connector from Power Apps and avoid all the headaches. I get that part. So let's go straight into the example. Initially, we have a trigger in this particular flow that basically uses Power Apps as a way or a mechanism to fire off an action. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna request that customer number out of our Power Apps application. In essence here, all I'm doing is I'm initializing this particular variable to retrieve the customer number or store the customer number from Power Apps. The next thing I want to do is I want to initialize an address collection for this customer, which is where we're going to store the data that is retrieved from our ERP application into this particular string collection. Now, here's the thing, and this is where the mechanics start to be important. Since we can't really store a collection directly into an object, there's no way to respond back to Power Apps or Flow with an object. So if you look at all the inputs here, I have the ability to just send back a text. I have the ability to send back a yes/no option, a file, an email, a number value, or a date value, but I don't have the ability to send back an object. So that's the reason why we need to select a type string here instead of object or array, just because we don't have the ability to send back that information in those particular data types. So the next, you guys are pretty familiar with this. We can retrieve the address, and this is the particular table that I'm targeting, in this case from my Microsoft Dynamics GP application, and I'm issuing a standard OData request to basically get any customer number that matches the customer number stored in the variable that I am loading up with my Power Apps data. So after that, we're just simply gonna take that response from that particular table, and then we're gonna apply or append, concat the results from the customer data. In this particular case, I need the customer number. I'm actually also applying to that each. I'm retrieving the address code. I'm appending the address 1, address 2, etc., until I complete my my full string with that data that's been appended. All right. Now the key aspect here is a couple things. First, in order to separate each one of the pieces of data, I'm using a comma separator, but I also need to think about how I'm gonna delimit that record. And in this case, I'm using a pipe character to separate and know where each record stands. So if you actually are following this, one thing that could happen is if I open Notepad here, I can show you quickly how I'm thinking about this. So one of the things here is you can have something like Aaron Fit 001, and one of the address codes could be primary. And if you think about this, the address one could be 123 XYZ Street, and I can then pass off, let's say we don't have an address line 2, I can say now city Chicago, state Illinois, zip code, whatever zip code, I don't know at this point. But the idea here is this address could be ended with a pipe delimiter. So that way when my next string comes in for this customer address, let's say I have 2 addresses, it will return warehouse, for example, and the address for the warehouse. Let's say this is 456. All right. So that's kind of how that string formation will work. So here I have the concatenation of those different pieces of addresses, and I'm finalizing or delimiting each address with a pipe character. Now the next thing is to respond back to Power Apps. So in Power Apps, what we'll do is we'll take that string that we've created and we are going to pass it back as a text variable. Remember, I don't have any other type of output that I could use, so I cannot use a yes, no, or file, or email, or number, or date in order to pass back that information. I gotta use a string. So I think that basically shows how the first part of this demo is gonna work. So now that we have the elements in flow, now that we have this flow particularly working the way we want it, and now that you understand how we concatenate the different pieces of data retrieved from, in this case, my ERP system, 4 customer addresses for that particular customer number that was passed in. Let's see now how we return that information back to Power Apps. So I'm just going to go ahead here and click on Canvas Apps from blank, and I'm going to call this test from flow. Very simple. I'm going to select a tablet type application just because I like the design surface, and it gives us the ability to do things without having to constrain ourselves due to space. So I'm just going to hit create here. Okay, now while this is loading, let's explain what we're going to do. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a text input control that we're going to allow the user to enter the actual customer number. Once the customer number is inputted, we're going to provide a button control that's going to be used to trigger our flow. And the first thing we're going to do is pass the content of that text input variable to Microsoft Flow, which then will run the flow, retrieve the customers, and get back the records. So we need different ways to process that. So let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to just actually add here a text input control. So that's the first thing we're going to do here. And we're going to call that, just provide a quick input for the user called enter customer number. So very simple. And the next thing we're going to do is add a button. That button is what we're going to use to retrieve addresses. So we're just going to call that get addresses. Okay. Now a customer might have 1 address, they might have 3 addresses, they might have 5 addresses. It all depends what type of customer we're interacting with, right? So this is one of the things that I wanted to highlight, because the result set might be a variable result set in terms of the number of records. We need the ability to deal with that too. So I want you to start to envision how this can start getting a little complicated at times. So the first thing here I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to action and click on flows, and I'm going to set this button to call my customer address. I'm going to actually have it trigger the customer address flow that we just created. So the only thing that I need to do is pass in the parameters. In this case, I'm going to pass in the text input parameter that we just created, and I'm going to pass in the actual text itself that is captured, meaning the customer number. And as a result, I'm just going to retrieve the text variable that is being passed from flow over to Power Apps. Okay, so we have that. And that's in essence part of what we need to do. But we need to also have the ability to store the string somewhere. So I'm just going to call this update context. I'm going to store it in a variable called address blob. So we can't forget our squiggly brackets. So address blob. And address blob is going to basically handle the value that is retrieved from Microsoft Flow. Boom, very simple. All right, we can see this by simply adding a text variable. So I'm just going to add a label here, and that label is going to help me see what's going on when I retrieve my information from Flow. I'm going to just set this to the top alignment. So I'm going to vertical align this to the top just for illustration purposes. And I'm going to set the actual text to that variable called address blob that we just created. Okay, good. So this should be runnable actually. So if I go here and I type in a customer number from my Microsoft Dynamics GP sample data and I hit get addresses, that should return that address blob record that we saw here. So boom, there it is. So we can see here that each one of the records is delimited by this pipe character, and that's good. That's what we want. We also see that it terminates with a pipe character. So that's super awesome. I think we actually made progress here. Now I'm going to continue implementing this. So once we actually get the result set back from Flow, then we need ways to parse that result set. So I need to now disjoin that string into different records. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to simply use the clear collect function to pass that into an address object. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to split the address blob by the pipe delimited character. So now that's allowing me to get the result set into a collection, which is what we probably want initially. So let's take a look at this. Let's see how that works again. And this is the beauty of Power Apps. We can test every single piece of our application as we go. So now I have my addresses back. I can go to the View menu and I can go to Collections, and I can see now that this address object variable or address object collection contains the 2 records that I want, plus some blank record, because if you split on the last one, it's gonna add that extra blank record. No problem, we can deal with that later, no big deal. So now that we have our split, there's one more thing that we need to do. Because the address collection is variable, we need to figure out how many records are in it. So let's do an update context here again. And I'm going to create a context variable that's going to store the number of records that are being retrieved by that collection. So we're going to use the count rows function here. And I like this because as we go along, we're exploring different functions. And count rows, we're going to apply it on the address object itself. Boom, there we go. We're going to close this out. And we need one more. There we go. That's it. That's our record count for the address collection. With that record count, if that record count is greater than 0, we now want to make sure that we retrieve something, right? So we're going to update context to initialize an index variable. We're going to call that n on 1. And what we're going to do with n is going to basically represent the number of iterations that we need to do through that collection to retrieve each one of the addresses for that customer. And here's the kicker. What I want to do in order to iterate through that collection is I want to use a timer. A timer is a control that gives me the ability to use the steps and the duration and all these things to perform, why not, an iteration through a collection. And I'm going to explain a little bit more as we go along. But in order to basically work that timer, what I want to do is whenever I know that there's any record to work through, I want to initialize this particular timer as we go along. So I'm just going to update context, and I'm going to select a variable called timer start and set that to true. So it presumes that I would have had to initialize that variable first, set it to false. So I'm gonna just do update context and timer start and set that to false, just in case the user decides they want to retrieve data for a different customer. We want to make sure that timer stops and you'll have the ability to go back and restart that timer at some point. And I also want to update context to initialize my record count to 0. Okay, great. This is awesome. So now we have those two pieces of information, so that's good. So let's figure out now this whole timer situation. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go back to my controls and insert the timer. Okay, there we go. We have a timer. We're going to move that timer over here just for visibility's sake. Nothing that we need to actually keep in our application. Once we know how that timer is going to work, we can effectively go back and hide it. So there's only a few pieces we need. We need that timer to take as little time as possible to process that particular record or each record. So we're just going to set this to 1 millisecond. We're going to have that timer repeat itself at each 1 millisecond. And we're going to want to actually change the way that timer starts to basically start with our timer start variable. So here's our timer start variable. We're going to select that. And a couple more things. So now that we have initialized our timer, what we want to do is we want to work with the timer events. So anyways, we're going to go to the timer start event. First thing that you are going to ask yourself is, how am I going to retrieve the string that corresponds to each one of the entries for the address? So if you go back here to collections, it's actually not populated. So let's go back here. Not important right now. We'll see how that works. But basically what we want to do is we want to split each one of the lines for that particular collection, the address object collection. And the first thing we want to do is each one of the records. So we're going to do a FirstN here. And FirstN is going to actually allow me to retrieve the first X number of records from the address object. So we're going to use the address object, that's the result, and we're going to pass in n as our variable. Okay, so as n increments, which we're going to do later on, as n increments, we're going to actually return we need to get the last record in that result set to work with it. So for that, we're going to use the last function, and we're going to encase this in parentheses again, but we need the result. So here's the result. So what this is going to do is going to allow me to get the last record from the number of records that are being read from that collection, and always work with that last entry. Now we need somewhere to store the resulting string. So I'm just going to do an update context here, and I'm going to select pass this into a variable called r, and simply enclose this to make sure that we get the result set that we want. Okay, so this is actually pretty good. We have this string that's going to represent each one of the address lines that we are reading from that particular collection itself. All right, so that's good. The next thing we need to do is we need to be able to split the address lines. So that's going to be, actually we need to split out the different address components. So that's customer ID, the address ID, address 1, address 2, city, state, zip, all those pieces of data into a different collection, right? And we're going to collect those records, or those pieces of records, into another collection called address components. Okay, so here's our address component collection, and what we're going to do is we're going to split R by the comma separator. So now you're starting to picture this. We actually got the collection split, the initial collection split to split each address, each full address for each customer, and now we're splitting each full address into discrete columns that we need to store in this address component collection. So what we want to do then is, I'm not going to bore you with all the typing, but I'm going to just copy a piece of script that I have. So I'm going to paste this formula here. And what we want to do then is we want to collect in the address collection. We're going to select the customer ID. We're going to get the FirstN for the address component result, and then we're going to get the first piece of data. The second piece of data is going to represent the address ID. The third piece is going to represent the address one, and so on until the seventh piece, which is going to represent the actual zip code. But note that we always getting the last of the first N to ensure that we always working with the last record. So this is the secret sauce. If you can wrap your head around this, then working with collections and being able to split records out is very easy. So the other thing that we want to do is, I want to make sure that I remove anything that is blank. So now from my address collection, if the actual, let's say, customer ID field is blank, then we just get rid of it. We don't want it at all in our collection. Okay, so I think I have the name of this wrong. So RemoveIf from addresses is blank customer ID. That's awesome. That's good. Nothing super complicated here. Just keep in mind that we've actually introduced 3 different functions. We've introduced the FirstN, we've introduced the last function, we've actually introduced the RemoveIf. So you are learning tons of functions here as I go along, and that's pretty cool because this is what this is about. Now I actually initialized this addresses collection here. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that every time the user restarts this thing, we can clear out that addresses collection. So I'm just going to do a clear addresses here in my get address button, which is a standard operating procedure here. Now this is all good. So you need to figure out now how, when this timer ends, we need to do a couple things. So each time we reach a duration, and we need to figure out if we need to increment the index that's going to iterate through the next record in the collection. So what I'm going to do here is, for this timer, we're going to do on timer end. I'm then going to just, paste in this next formula that's going to say if n is greater than the record count minus 1. Remember, we always have that one blank record. What we're going to do is we're going to update context, and we're going to stop the timer at that point. If not, we're going to just advance the index to continue processing additional records that we're giving from that collection. Okay, but I want you to have a way to visualize this. So what I'm going to do is we can do a few things. We can introduce a number of labels if we want to, and I always suggest you use labels to troubleshoot. Also introduce a gallery control, and that gallery control is going to basically display all the information I have from my addresses collection. So I'm going to tie it up to my addresses collection, and that should basically show me which addresses I have. So I'm going to map the title to this item that customer ID. Okay. I'm also going to match the subtitle to this item that I don't know, customer to address ID. Okay. And now I'm going to simply copy this, paste it here, move it down a little bit, and add this to show simply the address line. In this case, address 1. All I want to do is show address 1. So let's see how this works. So if we look at this and we just simply get address for the same customer, you will see that there's a few things that are happening. First of all, I'm able to parse out my different address components from that collection out of this blob that was retrieved from Flow. And this, in essence, concludes my demonstration. There are a number of things that you can do here. Think about retrieving data from some HTTPS trigger or some HTTPS function that you're going to run straight out of Flow and get data from some third-party system into Power Apps. That's the applicability. I don't know much that I would like to use a SQL connector in that way with Flow, but this was just to get the idea down. Also, you can use any number of things like labels to figure out what's going on, to see how things are working, to see if your counters are incrementing properly, to see if your record counts are correct. That is the kind of stuff that that this is helpful for when you're troubleshooting your applications. So I hope you appreciated what I presented here and that is something that you can find useful. Thank you very much for watching. See you next time.